Welcome back, Metas. This is my ultimate Jaws guide where I look at what are the best mods to equip for a Jaws unstable bomber build, and not just the weapon mods, but also which mods you should equip per armor slot, which armor sets you should have, which calibrations you should use, which food buffs are the best, which deviations, etc. Everything you might need to make a Jaws unstable bomber build. Now, the way that I did this is I did work out the damage calculations and put all my stats into a spreadsheet and then went through each slot by slot to work out which mod is better. Now, I have a more detailed version of this video on my second channel. I'll leave a link down below. It's an hour and a half long, but if you want more information on the damage calculations and more specifics on each mod slot, then have a look at that video. It should answer all your questions. This is the quick and dirty version of it if you just want a reminder of what you should be equipping for a Jaws build. As usual, I'll put chapters in the pinned comment down below, and you can skip around as you need to. Okay. But before starting, this video is sponsored by Raycon. Raycon's everyday earbuds make every day that little bit easier. Like recently, we took a little holiday, which was about a 3-hour drive. And with my Raycon earbuds, my wife and I, we had one earbud each and could listen to the same podcast while the kiddo slept. The active noise cancellation is great for traveling, whether by car or plane. It blocks out that constant drone, allowing you to enjoy whatever you're listening to. And there is plenty of battery to make it through any trip with 32 hours of battery life. Raycon recently added a multi-point connectivity feature, allowing 2 devices to be connected at once, which is awesome if you share with someone else. I now no longer have to find my wife's phone to disconnect my Raycons from them so I can use them. Both phones can just stay connected. With a range of vibrant colors to suit everyone and the unique protective cases, you'll be able to find something that you love. And Raycon is so confident in that you have a 30-day happiness guarantee and can return them. So go to buyraycon.com/Myelin today to get 20 to 50% off site-wide. That's right, you can get up to 50% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/Myelin. Okay, starting with the weapon features of Jaws and what you're generally aiming for in your build, and that's for a really high crit rate, if not 100% crit rate. When you have a really high crit rate, it means every second bullet will cause an explosion. So 1 crit, 2 crit, explosion. 1 crit, 2 crit, explosion. 1 crit, 2 crit, explosion. Okay, so when every bullet starts critting, you're going to get an explosion every second bullet. If you don't crit, it takes 4 normal shots to cause an explosion. So for the most damage, you pretty much want everything critting to get those explosions as frequent as possible. Now, the explosion damage is determined by a bunch of different stuff. See my other video for the damage calculation, but primarily it's determined by your PSI intensity. You start off with a baseline PSI that's scaled with your character level, but you will find most of your PSI will come from your gear itself. So if you have a look at your, let's go here, your PSI intensity here, this goes up as you calibrate it and as you have a higher tier and also a higher blueprint level. So you pretty much want to get all these things as high as possible at the top to give you the most PSI. You also get some PSI from the types of bullets that you're running. As you go through each bullet, you're going to have a higher PSI. Oh, this is probably a good time to just acknowledge that I am testing here in Eternal Land. I don't have Cradle buffs on. I don't have food buffs on. I'm not using Deviations. I'm also not using the best type of ammo. So if you're thinking, oh my God, that's not very good damage, why should I listen to this guy? This is just kind of for demonstration purposes, okay? One of the really unique factors about Jaws is that unstable bomber can also crit. So normally the explosions at the top are non-crit explosions on other weapons, but for Jaws that can crit. It has its own crit rate, but you just need to know it pretty much scales with your main stat crit rate. So as you approach 100% crit rate and you see all orange numbers here, you're going to see all orange explosions as well. All right, so that is all crit. When that is an orange number next to the explosion symbol, that is a critical on unstable bomber, which is unique to Jaws. The last weapon feature is when you hit a headshot or a weak spot shot, depending on if the enemy has a head or where their weak spot is, this will also add elemental damage to your explosion. So the Jaws does favor you targeting a weak spot. So when you hit a weak spot, you actually, I think it's like 8 seconds, you will have higher explosive damage too. You can't just keep shooting the weak spot to keep proccing that. It's just a bit hard to see those numbers for the video. Okay, let's talk about the accessories, starting from the top. When it comes to the muzzle, the sight, and the laser light, this is all pretty much personal preference. Whether you want to prioritize stability or accuracy depends if you're using a mouse or a controller. I use mouse and keyboard. I haven't used controller on Once Human. I'm not too sure what it's like, but just be aware that you kind of need to hit your shots with it, and it does reward hitting weak spots as well. So I would play around with whatever suits you best. I started off doing like full accuracy and then ended up going to stability, and that's just what I like with running this build. If you can't find, like if you're missing stuff here, like I'm still missing stuff because I haven't bothered to get it, it does kind of tell you where some of them come from, but if you want to know the location, just type in Once Human Map Genie into Google, and then type in the name of whatever you're missing, and you can find its location on a map. The main things to focus on for this weapon customization screen is really to prioritize getting the extended pistol magazine. This will bring you up to 18 bullets in the magazine with your armor gear, which I'll talk about in a moment. And the last thing is, when it comes to ammo, obviously this depends on how many resources you have, but the main rule here is do not use the blasting pistol AP ammo. You actually lose ammo on this gold tier. You lose damage on this gold tier compared to the tungsten pistol AP ammo. Most people probably just start crafting the tungsten pistol just because of it's a little bit less resource intensive. But if you're feeling spicy, you can do the tungsten pistol AP ammo, but don't do the gold stuff. You actually lose damage on this. Okay, let's talk about which attributes you should farm for on your mods. Primarily, you should be focusing on the violent suffix, which will give you crit damage as your primary attribute. Next, you then focus on weapon damage and then a enemy type damage. So I'm actually missing I'm missing a weapon damage here, but I do have the enemy type damage, and this will be great for farming bosses. Damage against great ones plus 6%. So crit damage, weapon damage, and then your enemy type damage. If you want to go for a infinite ammo build with Jaws, you're going to want also magazine capacity, because you need to get to 20 bullets, and you can only get 18 bullets with the large mag and the lone wolf set. So you will need to build into that if you want infinite ammo. So you would want magazine capacity. We'll talk about that in a moment. We also had a really big conversation in the comments about whether you should have some mods with elemental damage and status rather than crit and weapon. The long story short is crit damage is just way too powerful in a Jaws build, and that is because you're getting your bullets buffed. So every crit is getting buffed. So you got 1-2 shots on your bullets, and then your explosion is also being buffed. So just to illustrate this, let's just get it properly first. So that bullet's buffed, that bullet's buffed, and that explosion is all buffed by crit damage. If you build into elemental and status, only that is buffed by it. And even when you start looking at like damage multipliers and buckets of damage, crit damage still comes out on top in an end game build. Okay, so focus on those things. It's not awful though. Like if you can't get crit damage, the next best option would be to be building into status and elemental. Okay, let's talk about calibrations. The first thing is you're going to want a double crit rate roll on your calibrations. This is what allows you to get up to 100% crit rate. Crit rate is king when it comes to Jaws. Secondly, you're probably wondering, is a rapid shot style better, which has a faster fire rate, it has more bullets in the magazine. This is what allows you to get up to 18 bullets in the magazine, but it has less damage. Or is it better to run the other probably commonly looked at calibration, which is precision style, which has attack plus 25%. It's actually got range plus 40%, and the fire rate is negative 10%. Once you calculate all of that, the fire rate, the capacity, the damage it does, these two are incredibly close together. The damage difference is like 2%. So with how hard it is to get calibrations, I would take either. Whether it's rapid shot's technically 2% more damage. If you can get a rapid shot with double crit rate, that'll be fantastic. I doubt you'll probably be able to buy one off the server because people do tend to prioritize this. But the hidden gem here is the precision style is incredibly competitive. And in fact, you could argue it's a tiny bit better because it's got more range on it, which is really handy for handguns. So either, rapid shot or precision, whatever you can get your hands on, double crit rate is the priority. Okay, let's talk about armor sets and what armor you should be prioritizing. You do want to go with a full Lone Wolf set, all 4 pieces. Now, I did do the damage calculations for like half Bastille and half Lone Wolf and vice versa. It is best to run with a 4-piece Lone Wolf set and then pop on 1 Bastille piece for a bit of a bump in weapon damage. But the main part of this build is really the Shaman Vulture top. This should be one of your priorities because after triggering Unstable Bomber, you get a crit rate of 35% for 3 seconds, and this keeps on reprocking every time you get an explosion. So let's just have a quick look. My crit rate here is 42% or 42.2, and this is going to get 35% added on top of it as soon as I get an explosion. So we can just start shooting. Right, quickly open the menu after an explosion. We're up to 77.2%. This also has really good synergy with some of the weapon mods I'm going to talk about because it buffs your Unstable Bomber damage as well, which we'll talk about in a moment. But overall, 4 pieces of Lone Wolf, 1 bit of Bastille, and really prioritize getting hold of the Shaman Vulture top. Okay, let's talk about weapon mods. We're primarily concerned with Reckless Bomber and Bombardier Souvenir. Reckless Bomber says for every 1% crit rate, Unstable Bomber damage plus 0.5%. So essentially takes half of your crit rate and converts that to Unstable Bomber damage. So crit rate 42.2%, and then we have Unstable Bomber damage, which is half of that, 21.1%. Now, Vulture, the Shaman Vulture top will give you 35% crit rate on top of this. So as your crit rate gets bumped up, so does your so does the Unstable Bomber damage bonus from Reckless Bomber. Just do note that it doesn't get buffed by extra crit rate from your crossbow or targeted strike. Cool. The other option is to run with Bombardier Souvenir. Now, I didn't do this very well in my last video, and I got lots of comments asking about it. So this says, when triggering Unstable Bomber, automatically refill 10% of your magazine. If you can reach 20 bullets in the magazine for Jaws, 10% of that is 2 bullets. And if you're hitting a crit on every shot, that means every 2 bullets you're spending, you're getting a proc of Unstable Bomber, and then you're getting 2 bullets refunded back. Essentially, you don't have to have a reload. It's like infinite ammo. You can increase the magazine size by putting on mag expansion on the helmet, but this will slow down your damage because there are better damage options you have here. But you can reach 20 also just by having like the attributes, right? Like getting mag expansion in one of your attributes and building up to 20. So what it looks like is, hold on, did I put it on? So I'll put on Bombardier Souvenir. Okay. Oh, I've got 21 bullets in the magazine. As soon as we start getting crits and we start getting our build rolling, we should have infinite ammo. Okay, we got crits straight away. Great. So we can just keep shooting and not lose any ammo. So what is better? Infinite ammo with Bombardier Souvenir, never having to reload, or your Reckless Bomber, which is going to have actually more damage per magazine. The choice between Reckless Bomber and Bombardier Souvenir completely depends on how long the DPS phase is. Overall, Reckless has better burst damage. Bombardier Souvenir has got better sustained damage. This is how I think about it. So Reckless is going to have more damage over a single magazine of Reckless. So if your DPS phase is just this, okay, just one magazine of Reckless, okay, and then you have to run away and reload, Reckless is your better option. So if you're finding you get a full magazine in and then you have to run away, reload, reposition, whatever, Reckless is better. It has better burst damage. Things start to change though as you get more and more time during sustained damage. So if you get 2 magazines in, so you get the first full magazine of Reckless, you have a reloads, and then you get a second full magazine of Reckless. And these calculations were all with 18 bullets, by the way, not 20 as it is at the moment. Right, so then Reckless Bomber and Bombardier Souvenir are about the same. Okay, so over that time period, 2 magazines, they're about the same. Anything beyond 2 magazines, Bombardier Souvenir starts to outperform because it is shooting during each reload. Whereas, you know, you're losing damage when you're reloading with that. So if you've got 3 magazines of DPS, Right, that's 1 magazine, reloads. We do a whole 2 magazines, we reload, and we do 3 magazines. Bombardier Souvenir is 7% better. When we get to 4 magazines, it's 11% better. So it keeps getting better. With all that said, I would say you'd be surprised of how quick your DPS phases are and how much you move around and stop shooting and reposition, whether it's small enemies pushing you, whether it's boss mechanics that are changing like your position. You have to move because of a boss mechanic, like that green light, red light boss where you have to hide behind a pillar when it turns red. That is why I typically prefer Reckless. Is a little bit more flexibility with just doing burst damage, repositioning, burst damage, repositioning. If you do have a scenario though where you're doing at least 3 magazines of Reckless damage and you can shoot the entire time, then Bombardier is going to be better. An example might be something like a Prime War. I can't say I've timed how long your DPS phase is in a Prime War, but considering Prime Wars are like buggy as hell and sometimes reloading is an absolute pain, it might be nice not having to reload, and Bombardier Souvenir could perform better in that scenario. Take home point is Reckless for burst damage, Bombardier Souvenir for long sustained damage. And more than 2 Reckless magazines is kind of the breaking point. Okay, let's talk helmet mods. If a boss does not have a weak spot, or you're running a solo and you're just shooting like small enemies and you can't be bothered aiming for their tiny heads, their tiny weak spots, then Fateful Strike is king. If there's no weak spot available, Fateful Strike is king. You get crit rate plus 10% and crit damage plus 30%. This does not impact how Jaws functions. If you remember back to Jaws, one of its weapon features is that if you hit a weak spot, you gain explosion elemental damage plus 30%. Even if you run Fateful Strike, you can still get the additional explosion elemental damage of 30+%. The only thing you lose with Fateful Strike is this weak spot damage bonus here, which is that 60%, but Jaws still works with it. So that is if there is no weak spots available, because there is better options if you can regularly hit a weak spot. So bosses have the weak spot, or smaller enemies, if you can easily hit them, then there are 2 other options. The first is Momentum Up, and the second is Deviation Expert. These are incredibly, I hate when it does that jump. Deviation Expert, this one here, these are incredibly close together damage wise. I've taken into consideration their fire rates and all that kind of stuff. I would pick either Momentum Up or Deviation Expert based on your best rolled attributes. Once again, going for violence with your crit damage, your weapon damage, and then damage against great ones, or your enemy type damage on there. Technically, Deviation Expert does slightly more damage than Momentum Up, but you do have negative 25% range on Deviation Expert. Quite a short range with your pistols already, so you have to be a little bit closer. Okay, talking about mask mods, there is a very, very clear winner here, and that is Targeted Strike. When hitting marked enemies, crit rate plus 10% and crit damage plus 25%. There are multiple ways that you can mark targets. You can use the recurve crossbow. When you hit a weak spot with this, you'll get bullseye, so they'll be marked. When you get bullseye, you get vulnerability, which adds an extra 8% to your damage. And also specific to the recurve crossbow, you actually get 15% on top of your crit rate, which is very nice, but it's only on that enemy that you are shooting. The other options would be the Wildfire, which can mark targets as well, and that has a 60% chance to cause a marked target. It also spreads to other enemies, so pretty nice for running silos. You shoot one enemy and it has a chance for bullseye to spread to another enemy, so you don't have to remark. Another favorite of mine is the AWS. It's called Bingo. When it's in your inventory, it's called Bullseye BP here. When you switch this weapon, the very first hit will trigger bullseye. So you don't actually have to hit a weak spot. You can just whip out the sniper rifle. First bullet will actually mark the target as well. So that's how you mark targets. If you're really desperate or just want to have fun in a different way, you can use Retrusion Explosion, which gives you crit damage plus 40% against burning enemies. So you've got to throw a Molotov or have a friend with you that's applying burn. I think you can also use your secondary weapon to apply burn to get crit damage plus 40%. It doesn't do as much damage as Targeted Strike, because Targeted Strike if you're using crossbow, it has the extra crit rate. You're also getting vulnerability, and there's also a Cradle perk that gives you more damage against bullseye. There's lots of things stacking on top of each other for targeted strike, and it does end up coming out on top damage-wise. But if you're desperate, you can use Protrusion Explosion, or just want to play a little bit differently if you're bored of marking targets. Okay, let's talk about glove mods. The best in slot is your crit amplifier, which gives you crit rate and crit damage. However, there are some very close seconds. Crit boost is very close, and so is munitions amplifier. These are like 3 to 5% less damage than your crit amplifier. So if you don't have a well-rolled crit amplifier, look for your munitions amplifier or look for your crit boost and see if it's got the stats that you want on them, and you can prioritize them until you get a better rolled crit amplifier. Let's talk boot mods. Now, there's no real competition here. Covered Advance is going to give you the most damage. Taking no damage within 4 seconds grants 20% melee, weapon, and status damage for 30 seconds. So as long as you don't take any damage for 4 seconds, you get 20% weapon damage and status damage. So weapon damage is going to be for your bullets. Status damage is going to be for your explosions. So you're basically doubling up there. Really, really good perk and pretty easy to keep procced. Only thing would be is whether you want to refill your ammunition by shooting small enemies. So maybe you're running a silo, you're not on the boss yet. You get 2 kills, refills 100% of your magazine. Never have to reload until you get to the boss. Then you could switch over to Covered Advance. Okay, let's look at the top mods, and to prioritize damage for your top, you are going to have to dip into your blue mods for this. You can either choose crit damage enhancement, which is going to give you crit rate, crit damage. Of course, you want the violent, which is going to give you more crit damage, or very close second was munitions amplifier. It's like within 2% damage difference. So if you don't have crit damage enhancement, see if you've got a munitions amplifier that's violent with crit damage on it as well. That's your second best option. It's good to know this because these can be an absolute pain to farm. You don't really want to waste your controllers on silos to get hold of these. Otherwise, you just got to rely on getting them randomly from chests. So see if you've got a munitions, see if you've got a crit damage, see which one has the best attributes on it. Let's talk about the pants. I tested most of the mods in this category, and Deadshot came out on top each and every time. So Deadshot is your best in slot for your pants. Each crit hit by non-melee weapons grants 5% crit damage up to 45%. The effect is removed upon the next reload. Even though this is not really ideal for a pistol that has not many bullets in the magazine, it is still your best option for the bottoms. Okay, for food buffs, you want the mixed fried hot dog, which is used to increase your damage by 20% towards enemies affected by the bullseye, because you want a bullseye build. This is great for that. And then for drink buffs, you want to be using the whimsical drink, which is going to get 25% status damage bonus. Okay, your Cradle override perks are these: handgun enhancements, master tactician, deviation master, tactical combo, status enhancements, first round blast, steady hand, and also heavy strike if you're on a hard mode server. Okay, let's talk deviations. It's really going to depend on what deviations you have and their skill rating, because as their skill rating increases, so does the damage they do. So this Canine Skull, the wolf deviation, with a skill rating of 1, it does weapon damage of 21.6% damage. And then if I compare that to my Mini Feaster, which I've got a skill rating of 3, this actually does 21% damage per tentacle and goes up to 84% weapon damage. I believe Mini Feaster is the highest DPS you can get. Now, I have been a bit slack with collecting deviations and doing the math on this. Well, you don't really need to do the math because you just look at whatever's got the highest damage. But Mini Feaster is pretty good. The only risk for Mini Feaster is that the tentacles can hit any enemy on the field. So if there are other enemies on the field, they could hit them, and then you're not going to get the weapon damage on the boss you're targeting. So if you can clear the field, then they will hit the boss, and you can get a pretty big bump in your weapon damage. But I would just run with Mini Feaster or the Wolf, depending on what you like. I've been running the Wolf a lot just because it's like the first combat deviation I got, and I just never took it off, and it's good for like ad control as well. But I really should be using my Mini Feaster. There you have it, my ultimate Jaws build. If you want more details on damage calculations, check out my second channel. I'll leave a link down below. That's like an hour and a half long video. probably answers any questions you have about, well, what about this mod? What about that mod? What was the difference in damages? So have a look at that. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel and cannot think of a comment, you can just leave the word Jaws. As usual, it's been a pleasure. This is Myelin Games. Peace.